Hello everyone, welcome to another day in the clown decade. Today we'll be going through a short Channel 4 documentary where they go undercover into the infamous white nationalist organisation of Patriotic Alternative, with the group's organisers Laura Towler and Mark Collette currently pictured. And I've had my own runnings in with the group. They're a relatively small political organisation and do actually do some relatively wholesome charity work, such as litter picking and helping out local homeless people. But my main problem with them comes with their political opinions, obviously. So just over 2 years ago at this point, I made a video called How Not to Be a British Nationalist, which I was inspired to make as a direct consequence of this clip.
Matt V said to all three of us, if you could only preserve one book for the future white generations, which one would you choose? I'll go first because this is a real struggle for me. It's a real struggle of mine to choose a book that I would like to preserve. Because on one hand, I would obviously like to pick my own, but on the other hand, that looks pretty sort of big-headed. I'd say out of all the books that I've read, there's 3 books, one by a certain misunderstood Austrian painter, that is rather marvellous, one by George Lincoln Rockwell, that if I probably say on this show, it'll be banned, and Dr. David Duke's My Awakening.
Yes, I had a little trouble being convinced that this was a patriotic or even nationalist cause, when every single book that Mark Collette wanted for future generations to learn from involved Mein Kampf, and then 2 books by 2 American white nationalists, all about becoming racially conscious in terms of purely race, rather than being conscious about one's nation. And to be honest, this clip alone would probably be good enough to put a lot of people off. In fact, there's quite a lot of things that Mark Collette has done in the past that should put people off him instantly. And yet somehow Channel 4 managed to miss all this, despite the fact that they had an undercover journalist in the ranks of Patriotic Alternative and managed to get the most mundane examples of them being quote-unquote far right. So I guess without further ado, we should get into it. I really hope I don't get hit by copyright, but this is a risk we take on this channel.
UK's far right is changing, exploiting COVID-19.
The COVID narrative was sold to us for 2 reasons: power and profit.
So already they're making missteps and undermining their own position. They are basically saying that your weird uncle who has odd opinions on COVID is literally a fascist, which is not helpful for this conversation. They literally just could have put Mark Collette saying he loves Mein Kampf and thinks that it should be used for future generations to learn from, and that would have been enough. That would have been better, rather than saying, yeah, they've got some conspiracies about why the COVID reaction has been the way it is.
And seizing on the culture wars.
When they're taking the knee, that's all right. Fucking yeah. No kneeling to.
And this as well, another misstep. So your average normie is going to say, why is it Black Lives Matter? What's wrong with All Lives Matter? If you've got Black Lives Matter, why not White Lives Matter too? Why has it got to be exclusive? Like, these are really normie talking points. And what I find even funnier about that is that White Lives Matter was a direct reaction to Black Lives Matter, and the problem with the current leftist narrative is that they basically say, oh, the culture war's all concocted, it's all fake, it doesn't exist, despite the fact that pretty much everything in the culture war is the leftists doing something and the right-wingers reacting to it. But then not only that, apparently reacting to the culture war involves making really edgy jokes at a private campsite.
Dispatches is going undercover in Britain's new far right.
T8 on average.
We infiltrate a growing movement that's sparking clashes on the streets.
No. Yeah, I've been attacked. Some guys with masks on.
So they go into detail about that later, and I mean, they are saying that Patriotic Alternative's growing. I think they actually have gone past peak at this point. I don't think they're growing anymore. But this investigation has taken over 3 years. It started in 2019, and Patriotic Alternative was growing throughout 2019 and part of 2020. But it also sounds like the narrator's trying to imply that the politics of Political Alternative are sparking violence on the streets, and that is making out that it's the far-right Patriotic Alternative people who are sparking the violence, which it isn't, which the documentary even goes into, but I'm going to save that for later because there's quite a lot to talk about that incident, and I don't want to get ahead of myself.
Interfering with democracy.
We had a concerted and deliberate attempt to intervene illegally in the election.
So just for context, that guy is from Hope Not Hate. And they go into detail on how they interfere with democracy later, but just spoilers for now, it's literally that they were sending out leaflets, basically saying that Labour support Black Lives Matter, and the reason this was illegal is because they didn't declare on the leaflets that it was distributed and printed by Patriotic Alternative, which is illegal under electoral law. But they're making it sound like they're, as the new colloquialism goes, fortifying elections, and that's just not true.
And recruiting the next generation.
I watched a meme compilation. That is what's led me to being at campsite with some of the most notorious neo-Nazis in the country.
I know, right?
Yes, believe it or not, we're also going to get some Pepe memes to alt-right pipeline bollocks, but what do you expect? This is Normie Central, it's Channel 4. But as I say, when it comes to Patriotic Alternative, and especially Mark Collette, this is an open goal. Patriotic Alternative just can't help but give Channel 4 ammunition, and they still somehow don't do a good job. I'm actually gobsmacked. The video I made 2 years ago, better than this crap.
I would describe Patriotic Alternative as a fascist, anti-democratic organisation who are engaged in what I call hateful extremism.
So for more added context, that was Sarah Khan, and she's the lead commissioner for countering extremism. Now, I do indeed think it's fair to say that Patriotic Alternative are fascists. I mean, for God's sake, their leader is advocating everyone read Mein Kampf. And if that's not enough for you, here's another clip of Mark Collette literally saying he is a National Socialist.
Mark, is Patriotic Alternative... Oh, he's gone. Are you there? Oh, yeah, hello, hi. Are you National Socialists?
Well, that's a very interesting question. You see, I am a nationalist. I am somebody who believes that the indigenous people should always be put first. I'm somebody who believes that the indigenous people should remain a majority in their own country. I am somebody who believes in closed borders, managed immigration, and I'm somebody who pushes for a policy of voluntary repatriation. And I believe that people who come to this country or have come to this country and are not indigenous to this country should have to speak English, do their best to fit in, and if they can't, they should leave. I am a nationalist. However, I also have a social conscience. I believe in looking after one another. I believe in community. I believe in collectivism before individualism. I believe in the NHS. I believe in a benefit system that should protect the elderly and the vulnerable and people who fall on hard times. A benefit system that is there as a safety net, not as a hammock for the lazy or for migrants from all over the world. I believe in community spirit. And if that makes me a socialist, well, so be it. And if you think that I'm a nationalist, and if you believe my policies also have a flavour of socialism, you can call me what you want, but I simply define myself as a nationalist.
So yes, from the sounds of that, it sounds like he's on board with the National Socialist Party's 25-point plan. Again, another clip that I just dredged up from YouTube that wasn't that difficult, and that was recorded as Channel 4 were undercover in PA. So I don't understand how it was so hard for them to completely miss out on these clips, because these clips are nowhere in the documentary. But Sarah finished off by saying that this organisation is anti-democratic. I don't believe they are actually anti-democratic, though at least insofar as, until they are in power, I believe that they will follow the democratic system, because they appear to be doing so and have been doing so since their foundation. And she also says that they are engaged in hateful extremism. Again, I don't see where. Do they have hateful rhetoric? Well, I think even going that far is a bit much. I think they definitely hold opinions and publicly state opinions that are very off-brand for the general public, we'll say. It's very far outside the Overton window. So if you want to call that extreme, well, fair enough, but I don't think that's a very good label for it. Because what she's actually trying to say there is that Patriotic Alternative are violent extremists. And they're not violent. They're not violent at all. In fact, I can't think of any examples off the top of my head of Patriotic Alternative getting into scraps. Just let them keep going on their hikes and doing their activism. It's literally not hurting anyone.
The murder of George Floyd prompted unprecedented protests around the world.
Yeah, I think a standard definition for political actors rioting in cities, I think they'd call that political extremism, wouldn't you? Yet you wouldn't find anyone in Patriotic Alternative doing anything close to that. And yet it is implied with an undertone throughout this that they have the capacity to be violent extremists, despite the fact they've never been violent extremists.
Activism swept across social media feeds. But so did the backlash.
So here are some messages that were thrown around group chats for Patriotic Alternative. They range from conspiracies that they are Soros-backed, they have different names for Black Lives Matter, like Black Luther Mob, Black Liars Mafia, and there are claims that they are trying to bring down Western civilization and that they are black supremacists. Believe it or not, that is true, and they are pretty open about that, but we're not going to get into that right now. And what is also really funny is that Black Liars Mafia is actually quite an apt name for Black Lives Matter, since the organisers took all the money and spent it on mansions for themselves. And there's even a professionally shot video of them just having a conversation with champagne, talking about how they're able to afford all this stuff, basically on the back of a dead man. But again, these riots and looting that, at the very least, Black Lives Matter play apologia for, apparently that's not the issue, it's the fact that there's a reaction to people seeing towns and cities in America burning, in mostly peaceful protests, of course.
The rise of Black Lives Matter allowed the far right to kind of assert a white identity in a way that they hadn't done for several years.
Well, again, why do you think that is? Because a lot of what Patriotic Alternative actually say is basically, oh, these racial identities are allowed to have their racial identities. You know, you can have black nationalists. They'll look over to Japan and say, look, no one is complaining that Japan isn't having a load of immigration coming in and changing the demographics over there. So, of course, you're going to get a reaction, and of course people are going to see these patterns and say, oh yeah, why can't I do that? So Hope Not Hate are going after a reaction to what happens if you allow only minority groups to have racial identities, and even push them through official government bodies. I mean, look, there was that famous blog post from the NHS basically saying white people need to feel guilty and need to read all this critical race theory garbage. Of course you're going to get a reaction to that, and of course I react to that and say that it's horrible, but I try and get to the problem source rather than trying to pick off the symptoms one by one.
The reason why these people from BLM are rioting is because they're anti-white. It's as simple as that.
Now, it's certainly true that some black nationalists and black racial identitarians are just simply anti-white. You simply just have to listen to someone like Ibram X. Kendi talk for about 2 minutes to find that out. But really, no, I don't think your average person joining a Black Lives Matter riot is doing so because they hate white people. I think they're doing it just because they think they can get away with free stuff. And the reason I think that is because a lot of people in the 2011 London riots literally just joined the riots because they thought they could get away with free stuff. The prime example being this guy who has a massive bag of Tesco's basmati rice. Do you really think he's doing that because he's anti-white, or do you think he's doing that because he can think he can get away with it?
There's one group whose loud assertion of a white identity stands out. Patriotic Alternative, or PA for short, only launched in 2019. But they've since established regional groups across Britain, claiming up to 240 activists join their ranks each month.
And yeah, as I said before, they're probably numbers from 2019 to 2020. But I think the reason that they stand out is because they are really trying to get into the democratic process and really join the political debate in sensible ways by holding conferences, releasing political manifestos, doing real-life marches and things like that, which obviously grabs the eyes of local community and even that of the government. Hence, in this Channel 4 documentary, they've got the lead commissioner of countering extremism in this documentary.
During lockdown, their content attracts tens of thousands of views.
Certainly, Patriotic Alternative is the biggest far-right organisation in the UK at the moment.
I think it's fair to me to say at this point that I have used the term far-right to describe Patriotic Alternative as well, but again, it's a bit of a misnomer. Because as Mark Collett himself has said, and even as it is put in the Patriotic Alternative manifesto, they are completely for centralised managed economies, especially when it comes to the NHS and welfare state. Literally, their manifesto is just a Labour manifesto, though instead of saying we're going to allow a lot more people into the country, they say we're going to try and send a lot of people out of the country. That's really the only meaningful difference between Labour and Patriotic Alternative. And yet, despite all this, they still have to be considered a right-wing or far-right simply because they are white nationalists. So it's not a useful label, but I have to say absolutely nothing said by Hope Not Hate Guy or Sarah Khan has been particularly useful yet.
If we look back, you had to be hard to be on the far right, which of course excluded quite a lot of people. Increasingly what we're seeing now is the emergence of a more online-based, younger, more tech-savvy far right.
Well, yeah, these groups are going to evolve, and given how much people are online these days, of course things are going to evolve online first. People are making lifelong friendships by meeting people online now. Hell, my relationship came from meeting someone online. So it's no particular surprise that communities and political communities are rising up online. I mean, this is true for Labour and Momentum as well. I think that's the thing I don't like about this documentary. It's implying that the pipeline only goes one way and only one side is evolving. No, the pipeline can go any which way. I've known people who were ex-Sargonites who have moved over to Vorsh. There are pipelines between absolutely every content creator on the internet, so it's just a completely meaningless term because there are pipelines everywhere.
Dispatches is going undercover to infiltrate Patriotic Alternative. We began in 2020 but have been unable to broadcast until now.
And this is the funniest thing to me. As I said before, the two clips of Mark Collett that I have posted in this video both came from 2020. And yet somehow Dispatches don't put the two clips of Mark Collett basically saying himself that he is a neo-Nazi, and yet not in this. For some reason, just not in this Dispatches.
To get a foothold in the group, our undercover reporter, who we're calling Elliot, has to appear convincing.
I'm not going to lie, I absolutely lost it when I was watching this documentary, and this was how Channel 4 decided to be convincing. And the worst part is that it actually appears to have worked. And this is why it's so funny that the right wing have the whole meme of everyone's a Fed online, because it appears to be true, and they've got the most obvious hallmarks I have seen in my life. But I can kind of see why it worked. I mean, Mr. Brexit 19, okay, they can be being ironic by having an obviously Feddy name. But then his only two things in his bio are Englishman and believer in freedom of speech. And it's like, that could be mine. I'd put that as my bio if I wasn't a content creator like I am and I didn't have a community where I basically make memes and now my own bio is memed. And then again, oh, we need to look convincing. Or say Black Lives Matter is way too aggressive. I mean, man, from the talks I've had with people from Patriotic Alternative, they say way worse stuff on Twitter than that. It is amazing how some of them don't get banned. But this is Channel 4, and if he said the N-word, he'd probably be arrested and reported by Channel 4.
He begins by taking part in PA's White Lives Matter campaign.
Now you see, that's more like it. That's slightly more convincing to me. Joining in with the hashtags, @ing Patriotic Alternative, getting the interaction. Yeah, that's slightly more convincing than just tweeting out Black Lives Matter a bit too aggressive, methinks.
The campaign marks World Indigenous Peoples Day, a UN event intended to protect those communities.
Now you see, this is where Channel 4 are a bit moronic. That's an open goal for Patriotic Alternative, and it's not even something I'm necessarily against. In terms of, if the UN is supporting all Indigenous people to, let's say, have their right to self-determination, why shouldn't the Anglo-Saxon English and Celtic, Welsh, Scots and Northern Irish have their right to self-determination too? So it's quite funny that they can't see the irony of saying, oh, there's a World Indigenous Peoples Day, but it's far right to say that we should have this for the Brits. Despite it being literally what the UN want. Oh, but it's for white people, therefore it's bad. Yeah, well done, Channel 4. I'm sure this will stop people joining Patriotic Alternative.
An event PA co-opts, claiming it's white Britons who are under threat.
White people are victims. We're doing this because we're victimised.
See, this is what annoys me. They don't have trouble actually clipping from their live streams because they're clearly doing it throughout. So why can't you get the massive open goals that Mark Collett leaves by saying, I think that future generations should read Mein Kampf, and literally saying, yes, I'm a National Socialist by these definitions that make me a National Socialist. Instead, you just have him painting whites in a victim narrative. without actually going into detail of what he believes. This is just ridiculous. This is really superficial. This is a really poor effort.
PA paint an existential threat to white communities, and where they really call for radical action in order to counteract those developments.
So the first part of that is true. They are painting that there is some sort of existential threat against white people with the Great Replacement theory and things like this. Yet their solutions only seem to be radical to people who've lived in London all their lives. They go through exactly what they want here, and it's not that bad. Do you see what I mean? The United Kingdom is under no obligation to allow its borders to open to anyone. We are completely within our rights to close the border and say no one else can come in this country, even for tourism. We are allowed to do that. Now, obviously, it would be a ridiculous position to be closing the borders completely to tourism. And I don't even think it's necessary to halt all immigration. Because the issue with immigration doesn't come in when people come to this country to live and work here for a year or two and then leave. The issue comes in when hundreds of thousands of people come in every year, and quite a few of them come here for permanent residence, some not even knowing the language, and basically make colonies in towns and cities. The classic example being Savile Town, where in 2011 that town had a 93% Asian Muslim population. And I think it's perfectly reasonable to not want that, because England isn't an Asian Muslim country. Now, that's not to say that we shouldn't have any Asian Muslims in the country whatsoever, but that is to say that if you start seeing more Savile Towns around the country, you are probably going to see more people demanding a complete halt to immigration, because the fact of the matter is that ex-English residents of Savile Town can only fly from one place to another so many times.
The Great Replacement theory is at the heart of PA's ideology. It's basically the idea that whites are gradually replaced by non-whites. And this is inherently a very dangerous conspiracy theory.
Well, the problem with this is that, I mean, at first she says the Great Replacement theory is, well, what it is, which is the idea that white demographics are being replaced by other demographics in Western Europe especially, but in this case, Britain. And as the example before with Savile Town will show you, 93% of Savile Town is of Asian Muslim ethnicity, with only 1% of Savile Town actually being white British. So it's quite hard to come up with an argument of how that is not ethnic replacement. But I suppose the issue that I have with the theory comes in is I don't believe it's necessarily been done on purpose, at least in general. I'm sure there are some people who, well, I know there are people who like the idea of white replacement. I have the Ash Sarkar clip.
Similarly, he points out that in London, the white British population has decreased by 600,000, while the minority population has increased by 1.2 million. So, yes, lads, we're winning.
So if Ash Sarkar's happy about this, I wouldn't be surprised if some people who are in charge of immigration or something like that are happy about this too, but I don't think it's the majority, and I think mainly it's just because it's the current zeitgeist, but there we go. But I would like to know how the conspiracy is dangerous in Channel 4's eyes.
They even have a countdown on their website that counts the days until they believe the UK will have more non-whites than whites.
Patriotic Alternatives say this is a fact, not a conspiracy theory.
Well, they believe it because it's current trends, but let's not let that get in the way. And I can think of quite a few reasons why the current trend might change. For one, house prices in Britain are just going to get too ridiculous at one point that basically no one will be able to afford to actually come here. So it might not be fair to call it a fact, but I also don't think it's fair to call it a conspiracy theory because, as I say, it's just based off current trends, and so it's modelling a future. So it's only really fair to call this a conspiracy theory if you're also willing to call climate change a conspiracy theory, which I don't think Channel 4 are willing to do.
After months of building an online backstory, Elliot receives an invite to a PA hike. One of the group's many rambles in Britain's countryside.
My god, we've got to stop these evil neo-Nazis from Czech's notes. Hiking.
It's just absolutely beautiful. I've got some footage of the...
And part of PA's respectable face.
We do everything above board. You know, we have a code of conduct which says no racial slurs, no encouragement of violence, no threatening people.
Seems like a reasonable code of conduct to me. Will it be followed at all times by everyone? Probably not. But I guess depending if they get caught and what disciplinary action they take. Again, I don't think that this is a terrible thing to have. But Channel 4 are implying that they don't abide by it, but I guess we need to see evidence to the contrary.
Elliot's surprised to find that children are welcome.
I'm self-employed, so...
PA says they don't condone racist language. But is this policy adhered to by its senior figures?
What a weird thing to add in there. Oh, our reporter was surprised to find kids were brought along to this hike. It's a hike, what do you expect? Could be a nice family day out for some of these people. Is it a bit weird for a political organisation to have a march or a hike or whatever that kids are brought along to? I don't think so, because I see kids at protests and marches and hikes all the time. But obviously this one's only bad in Channel 4's case because it's a fringe group, but they didn't really care that kids were seen in those shots of the Black Lives Matter protests, where things were getting a bit heated, we'll say.
No. Working in a new place after kind of watching our P's and Q's for the last year out, Aldi. It's like the second day we were in Nottingham and it's just like, and I was like, oh wait, oh, cool, I guess I can back to this.
So I'll be honest, I really don't like it when people swear in front of kids, and I think it's perfectly reasonable to be offended at the sight or seeing someone saying terrible things in front of kids. But when it's two guys on a walk having a casual conversation like this, and it doesn't look like from this hidden camera that many kids are actually about, yeah, I don't really care that some people in a private conversation on a hike said the N-word. It really doesn't bother me. And the way Patriotic Alternative probably get around this is pleading ignorance, which, to be fair, if you're on a hike and people are saying things, you do only have people's word to go off when someone breaks code of conduct and says the N-word. But yeah, I really don't care that you made a joke. That is all I have to say. Like, there's way more important things to talk about for Patriotic Alternative, what they believe, what's in their manifesto, things like that. But, you know, oh, we're just going to have a quick look. Oh, they want a halt to immigration. Oh, cool. Oh, did you also know they say the N-word? Yeah, I'm not surprised white nationalists say the N-word in private. I am genuinely not shocked about that. That's all they had to say about this, by the way. This hike was so wholesome, all they had was one guy saying the N-word and saying, oh, kids are here and I don't like that. That was it. Well done, Channel 4. You've really exposed them to stuff that is publicly available. Jesus Christ.
Over time, Elliot appears to gain the trust of Patriotic Alternative. Today, he's been invited to help with leafleting in Hull.
Yeah, so I think that hike was from, like, spring 2020. And so now we're just skipping over a few months. You know, the months where the clips I've already had of Mark Collett came out. Just completely skipping over that. We're just going to go straight to leafleting. Like, well done. What are they posting out?
To peddle COVID conspiracies. And PA's message about the replacement of whites.
Yeah, again, I really need to find out, who's this actually harming? Like, look, everyone broke the law over lockdown. Boris Johnson did, Keir Starmer's being investigated for it, and I'd be shocked if he didn't break the rules. Everyone broke the rules. Because while COVID can have serious effects on some people, ultimately most people clearly felt safe. Look, my entire family broke the COVID rules, I broke the COVID rules, quite a few of my friends broke the COVID rules, and think about in Britain when England were the freest when it came to the COVID rules. Loads of people from Scotland and Wales kept travelling to Britain to experience the freedom that they'd missed. So it's not the worst thing in the world to see this pattern and say to people, look, do you think these rules were actually necessary? Do you think there could be another reason for this? No, it's not out of this world to go down that path, so it's not the worst thing in the world. But I also want to point out the language here, because a lot of public broadcasters make the point to say black people or Asian people and things like this. But when it came to this documentary, it was replacement of whites, and it's just an odd thing. It's like when in The Guardian they always capitalise the word, the letter B in black when they're describing people, and yet when it's white people it's always lowercase. It's just another small double standard, but one that I keep noticing, and one that I think is unfortunately giving away, well, as if it wasn't obvious anyway, but giving away that Channel 4 is in this kind of progressive bubble.
Organiser Baker is tactical about where to leaflet. He's consulted a former member of the far-right British National Party, who's now joined PA's ranks.
I've been on house, I've been liaising as to which places had good returns for BNP and stuff like that.
So it's specifically targeted, yeah.
Yeah, so he was saying this estate, apparently it was really good for the BNP. So it's like, alright, cool, we'll hit there.
Man, this patriotic alternative that has ex-BNP members in did good market research and are now targeting people who used to be friendly with the BNP. Man, I'm so surprised by this. Again, how is this bad for anyone? What did the BNP do? The BNP got destroyed in elections because it turned out they weren't popular. You know, literally, sunlight was a good disinfectant. Nick Griffin, the party leader, went on Question Time and just got destroyed. Whereas the opposite seems to happen with Nigel Farage, because Nigel Farage, essentially, he is the person that I would vote for every time. He's got good politics. He's the man who is good at pushing the Overton window to the right, whereas Patriotic Alternative appear not to be very good at that. And the reason for that is basically because they've got Mark Collett and this guy who is apparently ex-National Action. I wonder what their evidence is for that.
During Elliot's time with PA, he visits some of the most deprived parts of England.
It's like the poor areas, you know.
Yeah.
They pick predominantly white areas of multicultural towns and cities.
Hit his house earlier and he's like, my missus is half caste. And I was like, I want to go. It's like, it's not the term we use now, mate. Right. but yeah, he was like, yeah, pushing this racist shit and like threw it at me.
Man, excellent. It looks like they're not very popular. So what's the issue here? This is exactly what every other political party does. They go around putting forward their political agenda by canvassing and putting things through letterboxes. And it appears that people aren't too happy about that. And as they say themselves, most people just bin these things anyway. It's just so weird to me that this is what Channel 4 will focus on, rather than the online talks they have where they openly state what their positions are. I don't care that they do what every other political party and activist does. I'm not surprised they do it, and I'm not surprised by the reaction they give. Thanks, Channel 4, you've done a public service.
But PA's hateful messages aren't just being heard on the streets. Their engaging videos are appealing to a new, younger audience online.
They're getting the Zoomers, dude. The Zoomer to memes to PA pipeline. It's massive, you know. Hence I barely see anyone on the internet talking about Patriotic Alternative anymore. You're 2 years late with this. No one really cares about Patriotic Alternative anymore. And yet, even so, I can't believe that you've done such a bad job of exposing them for things that no one will be surprised that they do anyway.
PA's founder is Mark Collett.
This was a thing I had to get through Patriotic Alternative simps' heads for years. Having Mark Collett as your leader is suicide. Because this one picture, the first one that comes up on Google Images, it's a death knell. It's a nail in the coffin before you're even alive. And you're never going to scrub this image from the internet. It's everywhere. So if you're going to have him somewhere in the background telling people what to say, being more of a puppet master if you're going to have him. But they can't do that because he's the only person with charisma, it feels like. But this image next to a woman, a giraffe I should say, with a swastika tattooed on it, yeah, obviously this is going to give the wrong vibes for absolutely everyone who is in any way normal and has taken any interest in Patriotic Alternative. You lose so many people because of that, which obviously I'm happy about because I don't like Patriotic Alternative. But man, at least be somewhat tactically savvy.
The former youth leader of the far-right party, the BNP.
I'm not a Nazi, but if you want to call me a Nazi sympathiser, you can.
Why get a clip that's a decade old? Why not get something more recent, something from 2 years ago? You know, like the clips I got. How are Channel 4 this inept?
He now has a cult-like following online, attracting millions of views.
Hello, everybody.
In lockdown, Collett hosts gaming nights, attended by teenagers. Public live streams of warfare games.
I love how they phrase that. It's like, oh, he's posting out videos of warfare games. The undertone here basically saying that, see, they do want some sort of political violence. No, they're just playing the most popular game of 2019, which was Modern Warfare. I mean, for God's sake, I've got hundreds of hours in Modern Warfare. I've got hundreds of hours in loads of shooty bang bang games. I don't want political violence. And believe it or not, I don't think Patriotic Alternative want that either. What a stupid thing to say. Video games do not cause violence. Stop implying that.
Where he plugs his politics.
My political streams are now all on. There is also a complete backup of all my previous work on.
Oh my god, I love it. I think that they have censored out the word BitChute there. Channel 4 have gone as far as to post out public clips of Mark Collett and all these people, you know, going underground, seeing what they have to say. But after all that, they actually unironically beep out the word BitChute, or it might be DLive, or it might be Odyssey. I don't know. But I love how they do that despite showing his profile on BitChute and showing you that it's on BitChute. What is the point of bleeping it out if you're just going to put it on screen anyway? That is pathetic. How little conviction do you have in your own position that you have to censor where you can find these people? This is supposed to be an expose. This is supposed to put people off. Yet even you think you do such a bad job that you have to censor where you can find them. I do a good job of it, so you can find Mark Collett on Odyssey, BitChute and DLive. There you go, easy. If you really want to hear what he has to say, go find it. I don't care.
So if you
Patriotic Alternative are actively targeting children online, attempting to use videos, memes and other ways to radicalise and recruit young people to their cause.
The meme to Nazi pipeline, oh! Again, it does exist, but as I said before, there's a pipeline in every which way in online politics, so it's just a completely useless term. Absolutely every side uses memes to try and get people on their side, because they're a really good way of getting your ideas and your problems across. They're also a really entertaining way to do it as well.
This type of radicalising into extremism is undoubtedly a form of grooming. I
mean, yeah, kind of, but the issue I have with that is that absolutely every political side grooms kids. I mean, look, I had I think he's older now, but I think he was 15 at the time. I had a 15-year-old cousin who I met him once after he did a speech at one of those climate strike conferences, whatever, and he did a speech there, and I just asked him, all right, how long do you think the Earth has left? And he said 7 years, and me being a geologist, I'm like, well, how do you work that out? And he didn't really have a good answer. The reason for it is because he was groomed by teachers, I don't know what. I know for a fact it wasn't his parents. So it's kind of like, if you're going to groom kids into thinking that their future is absolutely doomed before they have a chance to do anything about it, why are we having a go at everyone else who does it? You're only allowed to groom kids into death cults about the environment, but oh man, you tell them about demographics, oh, that's grooming, and we've got to ban you from doing that. And really, it should be down to the parents to monitor what their kids are doing online. I mean, seriously, if you have anyone under the age of 18, just don't let them have social media. And if, say, they're 16 and you do let them have social media, monitor it like a hawk. The absolute worst way to go about stopping kids from joining PA is to ruin the lives of 16 or 17-year-olds who have joined PA because they're naive or whatever. Sometimes foreshadowing is very obvious.
Events like PA are going to be the future for us.
Barclay Walsh is one of PA's youngest members. He started following leader Collett when he was just 13 years old.
I mean, even that's ridiculous in my mind. I don't understand why at 13 you'd be following Mark Collett. Apart from maybe he's a very edgy guy, and as I said before, he is relatively charismatic. But I don't know why Channel 4 are just broadcasting his name and saying, basically implying that he's been a Nazi since he was 13 years old. I mean, why ruin the kid's life like that?
Walsh is a so-called Zoomer nationalist, a Gen Z recruit drawn to the far right online.
Again, this is another thing that Channel 4 are doing with their language, that they're just using the term nationalist rather than what Patriotic Alternative are, which are white nationalists. And I really don't like that, because that is painting me as a white nationalist when I am not one. Hence I keep criticising Patriotic Alternative in this video.
We are increasingly seeing more young people being drawn into far-right extremism. We have seen how children have gone on to commit acts of violence. In some cases, they've been drawn into terrorism. Although PA claim they don't support violence or terrorism, the fact that they are promoting the same ideology, the same dangerous anti-minority narratives as extreme right-wing terrorists, they are fundamentally helping to create a climate that is conducive to terrorism and violence.
Yeah, I really hate that argument, because it is a law that only goes, or it is an argument that only ever goes one way. We've had multiple communist and Marxist revolutions around the world. We've had Marxist and communist terrorism. Yet we never have this complaint about Labour or anything like that, despite the fact that Labour activists, Momentum activists literally say, eat the rich. And I mean, for God's sake, we had John McDonnell, the shadow Chancellor of the Exchequer under Jeremy Corbyn, literally say that what we now call direct action just means insurrection, which, believe it or not, does mean acts of violence against the capitalist class, I suppose. Yet because Patriotic Alternative pushed Great Replacement theory, apparently that means that they're okay with violence. No, that's not how the argument should work. I mean, for God's sake, there's been terrorism in favour of free speech. Does that mean that we can't advocate for free speech anymore? No. Stop it. It's a really bad argument, and this is coming from the head of the Commission for Countering Terrorism, for God's sake.
The law at the moment in this country is not adequate to deal with hateful extremist groups like Patriotic Alternative.
Deal with them how? Stop them from doing what? Go around leafleting and going on hikes and camping trips? Honestly, she's making it out like everyone in Patriotic Alternative is a terrorist cell in waiting. And it's just not the case, and in fact it is quite a dangerous implication, as we will see.
Undercover reporter Elliot learns that Walsh was arrested by police for handing out PA leaflets on his way to school.
Ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. Arrested for handing out leaflets. We are in clown world.
He was never charged. Online, PA's leaders give him their full support.
How are you doing?
Despite everything, I'm doing very well, thank you, Mark.
We're very, very proud of you. I am going to make sure you get a free ticket for the next conference, where you will definitely be introduced as a guest of honour for what you've been through.
I mean, I'm not going to lie, that sounds really, really croomy from Mark Collette there. The only thing it was missing was a few head pats on the guy. But really, as I say, like the kids are always told that people are proud of them whenever they go with big signs saying gay rights right now or else and things like that. I mean, the only real problem that Channel 4 are having with Patriotic Alternative is their politics. And as I say, I have an issue with their politics too, but really, if we are just bringing kids out to all these political events, what is the actual issue with Patriotic Alternative other than they have distasteful politics? I think it's just distasteful to bring kids into politics full stop, but that's not what's being said here.
But news of Walsh's arrest soon spreads.
Obviously everything was back then, I think people were bricking it out. A lot of the Zoomers have all just run off.
And next time Elliot meets with PA, numbers are down.
It's looking like it might just be us.
Oh my god, you need to arrest them. They're handing out leaflets, dude. I mean, the fact he wasn't charged obviously is a good thing, but you should never be arrested for handing out leaflets, unless obviously the leaflets are saying kill all X or Y, which they're not. So what was the issue? Oh, it might be hate speech. Turns out it's not hate speech to just point out that demographics are changing.
It's just Elliot and senior members Baker and Towler leafleting on the outskirts of Rotherham.
Probably chose that due to good market research again, I imagine.
They think they're alone, but today, others are watching. A masked group confronts them.
No.
And they also go for Elliot.
Listen, I'm not. Listen! I'm an undercover journalist. Listen to me! I'm being serious!
And this is another issue that Channel 4 has and that the current Zeitgeist has. Basically, they don't think that Antifa even exists, or if they do exist, it's just one or two people and not these groups. When in fact, if you read Andy No's book, they are pretty underground groups. They're relatively big, usually in the hundreds, and are usually localised to chapters in each city or town. And their uniform, as the term Black Bloc would imply, is to wear black and black masks. Does this mean everyone who wears black masks and wears entirely black outfits is indeed Antifa? No, not necessarily, but I wouldn't be surprised if these people are. But because of this, because they basically don't think they exist, they don't understand Antifa and they don't understand what Antifa are for or against, saying you're an undercover journalist to Antifa, one, if they believe you, you're a lucky man. But even if they did believe you, you'd still get beat up, because they are completely against the media. Since the media do indeed report on the violence committed, though they are usually quite sceptical about whether to call them Antifa or not, despite how much they try and tell them that it is in favour of anti-fascism. Yet what I find so funny about this is that while recording for this documentary, they constantly go on about how, you know, they had Sarah on saying, oh, you know, this will all lead to violence, you know, that they have hateful rhetoric, it'll lead to violence. No evidence of violence whatsoever from Patriotic Alternative, but Channel 4's literal journalist gets beaten up, has an assault committed against him, No, we got to worry about the far right. They're the real danger here, which I just find amazing. If I was that reporter, I'd maybe start rethinking my life choices and my positions.
PA blame the attack on far-left anti-fascists.
That's all they have to say on that, by the way. Perfect opportunity to try and investigate who is beating up patriotic alternative activists. Now we don't do that because patriotic alternative are the real violent assaulters or something. So now Elliot just goes away and gets into a Channel 4 car, which, you know, is decent backup for in case he gets attacked.
So what happens? Some guys just came out of nowhere and just started slamping us, just hitting us.
Was it because you were leaving?
Yeah. We've only been doing this like 10 minutes. They must have known.
Right.
Elliot's worried he's blown his cover.
Yeah, I'm worried that I've told them what I was. I just had to say to him, look, I'm an undercover journalist. It's the only thing I can think to say to stop this guy from punching me in the face.
Yeah, and as you can tell, that went really well. But you've just been assaulted, and you're still trying to undermine the patriotic alternative activists. And your first worry here, the first thing he says is, oh, I'm worried I've blown my cover. Dude, you've just been beaten up, you've been punched in the face, you had to run away to potentially save your own life. And your main worry is, oh, can I still undermine patriotic alternative and expose them for the Nazis they are? It's just a really strange mindset to be in. He must be really dedicated to the cause. But it's amazing, this never comes up again in the documentary. It's just, yeah, one of our journalists got attacked. By the way, patriotic alternative are terrible, but we can't find any evidence of them assaulting anyone. So why is the counter-extremism being focused on them, when clearly we've had some violent extremism committed here?
After the violent attack, Elliot's worried PA overheard his admission.
After the attack, he's not worried about his health or his mental health or anything like that. No, he's just worried if he can carry on undermining PA. I mean, fair enough, I know it's your job, dude, but come on, come on, Channel 4, at least pretend to care about your journalists.
It's PA's Christmas party in an industrial estate near Wetherby. To Elliot's surprise, the attack actually seems to have earned him points.
You've come back, so you've shown heart. And that's
Yeah. Thanks to Jonathan Haidt, I can understand why this would be surprising to leftists. Because leftists do not understand loyalty. Like, genuinely, they just don't understand that loyalty means a lot to more conservative people, we'll say. Because all leftists really care about is, you know, the Care Harm Foundation or the Fairness Foundation. And this is why he doesn't seem to really care that he's been punched in the face, but seems to care more about going after PA. Because he has no understanding of loyalty, yet he doesn't think that it is particularly fair that one of the most horrible regimes in recent European history, he feels, is trying to be resurrected in PA, which, by the way, is not necessarily what I think PA are trying to do. But because of this, and because they're quite open about being pro-white, in his head that means that they are completely anti-non-white. So that's more than likely why Channel 4, and especially this journalist, keeps going back. He thinks that it is his job, and he thinks it is moral to completely undermine patriotic alternative and quote-unquote expose them, even though I've learned absolutely nothing new about them from this documentary. But expose them to normies in hopes that it will basically destroy them, because then he thinks he will literally have saved lives, or at least stopped harm. So it is just funny to me that he doesn't understand why he's won points for coming back to a PA conference after having been assaulted.
Although Elliot's camera fails, Collett's racist views are captured on audio.
Let's see how applicable this particular accusation of racism actually is, because they're not always that accurate.
So I was having an argument with a nationalist a couple of years back, and I said I don't like those pit bull breeds, you know, they're bred for violence, you shouldn't leave your kid with them. He said, no mate, it's not about the breed, it's about the way you bring them up. I said, does that account for black people too? And then he shut up.
I mean, yeah, sure, he's telling a funny story, but I don't think it's the worst accusation of racism we've ever seen. In fact, even I'd probably say that that's a racist thing to say. Which is an issue that Patriotic Alternative have. They'll keep saying that they're lied about, but then they'll say stuff like this and be like, why are you calling us racists? Because the thing is, I'd say that as a joke. Because I don't believe black people are inherently more violent. But the difference here is that in behind closed doors and in private, Mark Collett is happy to say this and basically agree with it and put his name to it. And again, I've not really learned anything new here. I already knew Mark Collett thought this.
As the party ends, PA are looking to the future.
You can talk online all you want, but it's trust and community that brings us together, because that's the foundation that allows us to secure the existence of our people and the future for white children.
They could have had a whole section on the 14 words, but they're just not going to do it. But Channel 4 won't bother going into the history of the 14 words or anything like that. They'll just be like, oh my god, they want a future for white children? That sounds awful. Whereas the main actual issue with the 14 words is that they were coined by David Lane, who was a member of the white supremacist group known as The Order. And it's basically almost pledging allegiance to that because it was their slogan. And I don't even know if Patriotic Alternative necessarily know that the 14 words do come from a terrorist organisation. I mean, for God's sake, I've known Patriotic Alternative people who didn't even know why Nazis had ZI at the end for socialist. So I wouldn't be surprised if they've not looked into the history of the 14 words either. They just hear it's future for white children, that's what I want because I'm white. But the real problem with it is the violent undertones as it comes from a slogan from a terrorist organisation. That's the real issue with it. It's not necessarily the words themselves. Because if a black person said the 14 words and replaced white with black, Channel 4 probably wouldn't have an issue.
Another year, another national lockdown. Unless you're Patriotic Alternative. Elliot's invited to a group hike in breach of social gathering rules.
As I said before, basically everyone broke the rules. Let's not just say that they're crazy conspiracy theorists because they went on a hike. Loads of people got caught by drones going on hikes when they weren't supposed to. Let's be fair.
PA used the hike to publicise their politics. In the presence of young children, they display an anti-immigrant banner.
Again, not much to add from what I've already said. There's so many people who put forward their politics and use kids with it and have kids present. I really don't care.
One of the positives has actually come out of this lockdown.
With children stuck at home, PA takes to promoting homeschooling.
We want to help people out of the left-wing, liberal, establishment educational system.
Can you not understand why people would want that? It's something ridiculous, like 80-something% of teachers are openly left-wing, and the right-wing teachers basically have to stay silent on their politics. I mean, for God's sake, Count Dankula admits that he was basically groomed by his teachers to become a radical communist in his teens, and then he grew out of it, and now he's a Hoppian. But this is something normies are so dead against, and I just don't get it. They're really against homeschooling. And I think the main reason for it is because, then the government can't keep an eye on what they're being taught. Well, they're teaching your kids that they're not going to have a future because of global warming. I don't see how that's any worse than teaching them the basics of Christian religion. And yeah, sure, I think parents indoctrinating kids to become white supremacists, yeah, I actually agree that's a bad thing. But I believe it's up to the parents to decide how it is best to raise their children. But those that homeschool their kids are usually teaching their kids things on the actual curriculum anyway. Things like maths, science, English. The main thing they want to get kids out of school for is these assemblies and these other lessons where they teach kids life lessons and things like that, where it can just feel like a really one-sided debate. But I was lucky enough to go to Catholic school, so it wasn't too bad for me. And that's why a lot of people really want to send their kids to Catholic schools, even if they're not Catholic.
They have a template letter on their website for parents to withdraw children from school. And an alternative curriculum they say teachers helped to create.
Alright, I'll start agreeing that this is really bad indoctrination for kids. Because after debates and talks I've had with people from Patriotic Alternative, I don't think this will be very good resources. But we'll see what Channel 4 go through.
Their resources portray white people as the only natives of England.
I hate to say this, but that is true. This, you'll get David Lammy whenever he's talking about his ethnicity. He'll always refer to himself as Afro-Caribbean until someone tells him he's not English. Then he gets really defensive about it, and then he'll say that he's English. It's only when second or third generation immigrants from mono-ethnic families, it's only when they're challenged that they start saying that they're from Scotland or England or things like that. And I've done a video on this. But the rest of the time they do use their minority status to basically get political capital and things like that. So Patriotic Alternative describing the English and basically saying, yeah, the English are all white, it's not necessarily wrong. Where it starts to get iffy is when you have mixed race people, because most of these mixed race people, if they are born and live in England, say, they will call themselves English, and I don't think it's the worst thing in the world to call yourself that. And obviously if they're mixed race, they're not necessarily going to have white skin. They'll give it a generation or two and they will basically just have white skin again, because that's just the nature of it. I mean, Carl Benjamin, Sargon of Akkad, he had a black grandparent, he now looks white. So that's the main criticism I'd have with this, but really when it comes to mixed race couples, they're not very common anyway. So one of the main ways you'd probably describe the English in general is white, yes, I'm afraid to say. But this is one of my main issues I have with Patriotic Alternative. They think just being white is good enough to have access across Europe. They are pan-Europeans. Whereas I'm more of a, let's reduce immigration a bit, let's keep things a bit more to localism, and marry and have families with whoever the hell you want. Just make sure that we're integrating immigrant populations, and I'm afraid to say that's just completely impossible to do with the numbers we currently have.
This is a curriculum that is basically a brainwashing of children into white nationalist ideologies.
I mean, what I love about this bit is that the rest of the paragraphs are actually relatively good. You know, it's not the worst description of Britain I've ever seen, and in fact I'd say it's quite an accurate one. Especially this second to last paragraph here. Britain has given the world some of the bravest, most enterprising, most adventurous and most inventive people in history. We conquered the world and we took our spirit of endeavour with us. I mean, that is true, and in a lot of these countries where we had power, we did improve things. We also made a hell of a lot of mistakes as well, don't get me wrong. But generally we did cross oceans to try and make things better. I mean, for God's sake, we completely stopped the transatlantic slave trade. But then the last line I just think is really weird. This is our land, it was bequeathed to us by our ancestors, and we are proud of what we are. And I can get the sentiment, and even I'm proud of British history to an extent. But I don't know, in a curriculum when you're teaching kids about this isn't the way I'd put it across to them. I wouldn't tell them that we need to be proud of who we are. You just need to tell them stories of the British Empire. Say, we did this, there's no reason to stop doing the good that they did, and there's good reason to stop doing the bad that they did, and then let the kids think what they want from there. Saying to them, you need to be proud of this, I just think is a bit weird, and I can see why Channel 4 would react in the way they are.
They are trying to indoctrinate the younger generations in order to have a longer-term political impact.
PA told us parents should be offered ways to educate their children free of material that intends to inflict anti-white self-hatred. They added, we make no apologies for the banners, and that lockdown regulations were unconstitutional.
So, I mean, sure, I think parents should have a say in their kids' education, and if they don't want anti-white self-hatred instilled in their kids, I think that's fair enough. But you can tell that the Americanisms really get inside Patriotic Alternative's culture, because it is a very weird thing to say in Britain, to say, oh, this is an unconstitutional right. That is mainly an American thing to say, given that they have a written constitution, whereas ours is partly written, partly unwritten, partly all over the place. It's not really the thing we go to when we say that's something that goes against the British spirit. But either way, I don't think that was a terrible reply from Patriotic Alternative.
Spring 2021. PA's political ambitions hit a stumbling block.
Unfortunately, we have been rejected by the Electoral Commission. So you can
Their application to become a political party is rejected.
The documentary doesn't go into why. Honestly, I can't remember why either. But that's all the documentary has to say on it. I'd love to know why they were rejected, but I have no idea, and I think the reason that they're not being clear on it is because I think they're trying to imply that it's because of the violence they instill or something like that. But it's hard to tell, because they don't go into it.
And PA's members are feeling the heat too. Online, their true identities are being outed.
Yeah, I'm not particularly surprised some of these people get doxxed. I mean, I'm being funny, but if you're showing up on camera every week, people are going to end up finding out your true identity and you are going to get doxxed. That's why I do my best to hide my dox as best I can.
As for PA Yorkshire's James Baker, he's Sam Mellier. And under that name, he has history with the far right.
Were for Britain that far right? I don't remember them being that bad. I just remember them being kind of a thing a lot of people wanted for a couple of months and then they just died. Also, didn't the founder of For Britain come out and basically have a massive go at Patriotic Alternative for, well, for lack of a better term, being fascists?
In November 2016, Melia attended a demonstration alongside National Action.
Yeah, well, he's basically been caught red-handed with an extremist far-right group then. Fair enough, that's better evidence than I expected.
A far-right group whose views were so extreme, they were banned soon after.
National Action was a pro-terrorist, openly neo-Nazi organisation. Many of their own members were involved in really extreme violence.
See, we have a problem here because I can't take Hope Not Hate's word for this. Alright, you say they're neo-Nazis and a lot of them are throwing out Roman salutes. Okay, I can get on board with that. I am happy to accept that. But then you just say they're involved with violence. It's like, okay, was that self-defense? Were they attacked? Were they going out looking for fights? Like, I don't know. I need more context than that. I need a lot more than this because unfortunately Hope Not Hate do their best to make themselves uncredible.
Following the brutal murder of Labour MP Jo Cox, National Action posted support for her killer, right-wing terrorist Thomas Mair.
Yeah, alright, from this, I reckon that yes, I do believe that National Action are in favour of violence and are extremists on the far right side who supported the murder of Jo Cox. Yes, I agree that's bad. Like, finally, it's only just now that they're getting to points where they are making accusations and giving decent evidence for it. And it just happens to be to character attack one of PA's senior members. And, alright, it's a fair character attack. And I don't think it's a completely unjustified character attack. It's only 3 or 4 years before this documentary is being filmed where he was part of these rallies and seemed to firmly stand with them. So I don't think it's the worst character attack I've ever seen, but it's really not telling me that much about PA, I'll be perfectly honest with you.
Some 7 months after the group was banned, Melia was photographed alongside some of its key players, including leader Christopher Lithgow and strategist Mark Jones. Both are serving prison sentences for their involvement in National Action.
Yeah, I get it, guilt by association and all that. Right, the important thing is, does he still believe the thing, or would he still stand by National Action today? Is he for violence, things like this? Because people can change their opinions. And he never got arrested, and he was never put in jail or charged with anything. So why does it matter what other people did, rather than just telling me what Sam has done?
Former National Action activists within PA are amongst their most seasoned and most prominent activists. I don't believe that they've jettisoned their politics. They've just found a new and perhaps bigger platform to spread these ideas.
You have absolutely nothing to base that on. You don't know. You don't actually listen to these people. Hope Not Hate are honestly some of the most lazy journalists and investigators I've seen in my life. The most they'll do is guilt by associations. They'll never ask for comments. They'll never actually do more than say, oh, I saw them at this rally this one time. And, in Sam's case here, all they can say is, yeah, he was part of National Action. Do you still know if he agrees with what National Action were doing? Do you know if he's trying to get away from that type of thing? No, you have no idea. You're just using it to paint all of Patriotic Alternative as just the new National Action, which I don't think is fair. Though obviously they're worried about similar issues, which, guess what? A lot of people are worried about demographics.
Patriotic Alternative told us, we do not in any way condone terrorism, and say the film's experts' opinions are wrong and politically biased. Sam Melia provided no comment. He has previously denied ever being involved with National Action.
I've not had a reason to do this yet, but Patriotic Alternative actually put out their full reply, or comment I should say, to the production team at Channel 4 that were making this documentary. And this is the part where I thought, wow, I do not trust that, because they say the experts are wrong, ... and ... politically biased. So I think there's quite a lot left out there. So I'm going to be fair and go through the paragraph where that comes from. Throughout the documents passed to us by Hard Cash Productions, several experts are repeatedly cited, yet these experts are clearly and demonstrably wrong on a number of occasions, and rather than citing facts regularly, impart their opinions. I have genuinely seen that throughout the documentary, so well done. We were never informed of who these so-called experts are. As such, it is our opinion that these are politically biased left-wing activists. The amount of context that's missed out of there, I mean, they make it sound like such a cookie-cutter reply, but they have good reason to say this, really. What's more, it is a fundamental breach of our natural justice to use anonymous critics to attack us. Don't necessarily agree with that last part. But as far as I can see in this comment, Patriotic Alternative make a fair case. Because the only thing that I have seen so far that in any way is fair from the expert's opinion is basically just saying that National Action were neo-Nazis and violent extremists. And even the violence part I'm a bit dubious on. But I mean, as I say, and as we've seen throughout this documentary, it is just accusation, really bad evidence.
It's the run-up to the by-election in Batley and Spen. Cox's former constituency is up for grabs. PA can't compete as a political party. But Melia puts out a message asking for members' support.
Well, this is part of the issue if you have systems up in place and then they can't actually compete in that space. And unfortunately, I can't remember why their application was rejected, but Channel 4 don't tell me, and I really can't be bothered looking it up. So I can't tell you whether it's justified or not, but that's not my point. My point is that obviously they're gonna use tactics that they are able to use if you're kicking them out of the game.
Thousands of fake Labour leaflets are posted through letterboxes. They appear to have been published by the Trade Union Congress and show Keir Starmer taking the knee.
So here's the thing. This is a funny leaflet. This is a funny meme. And not only that, it's true. Labour were quite open about taking the knee for Black Lives Matter, and they had a literal race manifesto that was basically all in favour of minorities and things like that, obviously. But the problem is that Patriotic Alternative broke electoral law doing this, because if you are handing out political leaflets like this, you have to make it clear who has published and distributed them, which party. So, it has to, if it is by Patriotic Alternative, they have to put Patriotic Alternative somewhere on there. Problem with that is that as soon as people see that and Google it, they're like, oh, it's a load of neo-Nazis, screw that, this is ridiculous and probably a lie. Unfortunately, it's still breaking electoral law, so this is finally a bad thing that they're doing.
The leaflets attract headlines, but no one claims responsibility. Dispatches can now reveal it was PA and Leader Collett who were behind the leaflets.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. Good meme, but I mean, I don't know why you kept this from electoral law for so long, but I wonder if they'll go down, to be honest.
Sam Melia discloses their aim: to turn white voters away from Labour. After the leafleting, PA celebrate their meddling in a private Telegram group. Deputy Leader Towler reminds everyone to keep stum.
Well, yeah, Laura, you broke electoral law. Of course you'd get in trouble if people find out, but people have found out now, so what are you gonna do?
It is totally illegal to put out a leaflet in the name of another organisation during an election, and it is incumbent on the authorities to really look into this and prosecute where the evidence exists.
Hope Not Hate Guy finally says something sensible. That is all. I'm just shocked, is all.
Months later, PA tried to interfere in another by-election, mimicking the Conservatives in the constituency of murdered MP Sir David Amess. Online, they are explicit about wanting to influence voters.
So I understand this is a documentary that is trying to uncover Patriotic Alternative and all that, but really, if you got to bring up that Joe Cox was murdered by a far-right guy and give his opinions there, why aren't we then saying that, oh, David Amess was killed by a radical Islamist? Because when you're constantly going on about the far-right killing people and being for political violence, and then you just say, oh yeah, this guy died, by the way, he was murdered. I mean, obviously it was all over the news, so people know that he was murdered by a radical Islamist, but the problem is, it's just giving this undertone that it was a far-right attacker again. And I just think that undermines, well, there's a lot of things that have undermined your documentary, but this also undermines it as well. So next up, the documentary is going into the annual summer camping trip that Patriotic Alternative apparently have. I've never heard about it before, but could be interesting.
They've told the campsite owners they're a community group who help the homeless.
To be fair to Patriotic Alternative, they do charity work like that. And they're obviously not going to tell a campsite, oh, by the way, we're a load of neo-Nazi fascists coming in, please make room for us. That's obviously going to get them kicked out. It's crazy, this documentary. Like, yeah, obviously they're going to tell them that. But don't imply they're liars or maliciously lying about that, because they do that.
As usual, PA's code of conduct applies. It claims to prohibit racial slurs and the promotion of violence.
Really? That's your first example? That's your first example of someone not following the code of conduct of no promoting violence and no racial slurs? Someone commenting that a lot of the England team aren't white, basically. Hopefully you get something a bit better than that soon. That's more like it. Now, you know, clearly they just referred to a black person as a chimp. Now you're actually getting into the realm of racial slurs. But again, it's bantering in private. I really don't care what they're saying in private here. I really don't care that they're being edgy.
The group talks about shooting people who take the knee for Black Lives Matter.
When they're taking the knee, that's all right.
Yes, they're being edgy, boys. I get it. They've talked about their manifesto once, and all they talked about was saying that they want to halt immigration. The main reason I think they did that is because basically the rest of the manifesto is a Labour manifesto, as I said. But this documentary really has nothing to say outside of a lot of them are edgy boys, and they do have horrible politics. Like, that's it. This really doesn't seem as bad as you're making it out. They're not violent. They're definitely not getting any political power. Why did you need to go into this? Like, what was the need? You're just making yourselves look like idiots.
They even discuss the use of firearms.
Yeah. Well, it doesn't matter if the loop becomes a little bit, but you know, because it just increases the anxiety.
Yeah, the suspense. Click. Oh, that was lucky, wasn't it?
Yeah, they're edgy boys, they're making jokes, I don't care. I talk about things like this all the time. It's jokes, it's fantasy, no one means it. If this is really your line for advocating violences, then basically everyone in the UK should be in jail.
No kneeling.
Finally, you got to one of the worst things they can possibly say. They said the N-word. Imagine my shock.
The camp is attended by many people who defy the far-right stereotype, including someone who says he's a trainee teacher. And a Scouts volunteer, a regular PA member.
This is Channel 4 telling you that the Nazis are everywhere.
He talks to others about the soap the Nazis made from the corpses of Jews.
I hear there's one group of a few PA members who are going to start a soap business. What's you can wash after you? Yeah, all stocked out of Auschwitz. You won't get much soap from there because not much happened.
See what I mean? It's just edgy jokes. This is so normal. Genuinely, a lot of people love dark humour. And don't get me wrong, there are Holocaust deniers within PA. I know because I talk to them. But honestly, worrying about these jokes, worrying about these guys having a laugh, basically, it's hardly like Generation Identity, who were flying people around countries to go to training camps to learn how to fight. This is not what this is. If it ever gets to that point, maybe it's worth investigating more there, but really all you've done here is told me that people who are edgy online are edgy in real life. Great, I don't care.
PA Zoomers flock to leader Collett, including teenage protégé Barclay Walsh. Later, Walsh talks about his Jewish teacher.
She's literally got Hebrew tattoo on her arm. I thought they marked them with numbers personally.
Jesus, see what I mean? Oh my god, they all flock to their leader. Yeah, of course they do. Have you seen the Corbyn cult? Have you seen what Jeremy Corbyn's like? He got up in front of Glastonbury and everyone went woo. Like, yeah, people flock to their leaders, no duh. And oh no, he made another edgy joke. Yeah, I get it. People are edgy online, they're also edgy in real life. Yeah, I know that, being an edgy boy myself.
He explains his entry into the far right after the death of a relative.
I mean, quite reclusive. You know, I started watching trolling videos, like cringe compilations and stuff like that.
Wow, nice one. Yeah, you entered through the meme angle.
Literally, like, it is quite funny to think I watched a meme compilation. That is what led me to being at a campsite with some of the most notorious neo-Nazis in the country.
I know, right?
Oh my god, far-right pipeline exposed. Yeah, we're doing this again. This is just telling us nothing new. This is just 30 minutes of telling us the same thing over and over. Yeah, I get it. They're not that averse to telling everyone that, yeah, they are fascists or they are neo-Nazis or white nationalists or whatever. They will admit that. And even if they don't, given that a lot of them had, at best, Oswald Mosley or British Union of Fascist profile pictures, some even went as far as to having literal Nazis as their online photos. So, yeah, they're pretty open about supporting it. This is nothing new. But the problem is that their main talking points a lot of people do see as problems. But the problem with this documentary is that it's implying anyone who raises any of these talking points are probably on their way to joining Patriotic Alternative or might be a secret Nazi or something, and that's just the wrong way to go about this.
Mark Collett and Laura Towler told us that Patriotic Alternative is proud to advocate for the rights of the Indigenous people of the British Isles, and that it is our constitutional right to organise. They said PA activists engage in legal, democratic and peaceful political activities.
So the first two things said there, they're pretty much close enough that you get the idea of what PA is saying. I don't need to go into that. But what gets me is the next bit where they say, oh, they do things legally and do things democratically and in a peaceful political fashion, whatever. What's actually said here is throughout the documents provided to us by Hard Cash Productions, there are a number of quotes and retellings of events that are either taken out of context or wholly misrepresented. I don't know if I'd go that far. One example of this is when Laura Towler and her husband were attacked during a leafleting session by masked leftist thugs from Antifa. I don't see how that was misrepresented, personally. Patriotic Alternative activists should be free to carry out democratic and peaceful political activities without having fear of violence from left-wing terrorist organisations. So what they're actually saying with this sentence is that they're not able to carry out democratic or peaceful political activities without risk of being attacked, which is, you know, saying a completely different thing as to what the documentary came across with. But the thing that got me the most with this is I don't know why they put legal in before that, because further down, the first time legal is even mentioned in this comment is after that sentence. So during the production, Hard Cash Productions erroneously uses the term grooming. Grooming is a coercive act largely associated with Muslim men who ply underage white girls with drugs and alcohol in order to sexually abuse them. Right, that is one definition of grooming, yes. That is not the term of grooming that they are using here. To characterise persuading others to join a cause through discussion or by presenting them with alternative ideas such as grooming is completely outrageous. No, it isn't, because we all use that on left-wing teachers. The production also makes much of a young man, Barclay Walsh, being arrested for delivering leaflets. They say it once and they say he's not charged. I don't think that's fair. Barclay was released without charge because the leaflets in question are legal and delivering them to households is simply an example of Patriotic Alternative participating in the legal democratic process. True. So it is really undermining Channel 4's credibility when they're saying, oh, they claim to be democratic and they claim to be peaceful political activists, but really they're not. And it's like, well, what's your example? Oh, one of the guys used to be part of National Action. Great. Has anyone from Patriotic Alternative been arrested for violence? No. No, the worst thing that they should probably be investigated for is to find out whether they broke electoral law or not. But really, that's the worst thing you can say about them in terms of legality. When it comes to private conversations, saying N-words and making racist jokes and things like that, no, that's not good enough to say that they are lying when they say they are carrying out the democratic and peaceful political activities. And the only time they bring up that they are doing something legal is when Barclay Walsh, was found to be innocent and wasn't charged. So as far as I'm concerned, at time of recording, they should be investigated for a potential crime, but yeah, they've done everything legally and peacefully. They've done nothing wrong. They just have really bad politics. That's it.
And denied exploiting global events and the culture wars. They told us, To characterise persuading other people to join a cause through discussion or by presenting alternative ideas as grooming is completely outrageous, and that the programme takes events out of context and misrepresents.
Yeah, I mean, I've already gone through all that. It is pretty cookie cutter for right-wingers just to say, oh, that's taken out of context, but the thing is, a lot of the time it's true. In terms of this particular documentary, I don't think that much is actually taken out of context. And as I went through before, the thing they said was taken out of context was, you know, those thugs beating up the three people, you know, Laura Towler, her husband, and the undercover reporter. But I honestly don't see how that was taken out of context. You had full context. They were leafleting for 10 minutes and then they got attacked. I don't understand what's missing.
There is no good reason why we should allow hateful extremist groups like PA to operate, and I believe there's an obligation on our parliament, on our government, to outlaw the activity of groups like Patriotic Alternative.
Outlaw them from doing what? Having discussions, going on camping trips, hiking, leafleting? As long as the leaflets obviously are within the electoral law. Like, really, what are you saying here? Specifically, what you don't like here is their politics. You want to outlaw this particular political position, but the problem is that you can't go against people's opinions like that. If we allow communists, why not allow fascists? They are literally two sides of the same coin. A lot of people who were on the far left or far right basically admit that they went all the way from one side to the other side. This happened in Nazi Germany, for God's sake. They were called steaks because they were red on the inside and wore brown on the outside to signify they were part of the Nazis. But they would have been Bolsheviks 2 weeks ago or something. So you can't just ban one and not the other. Seriously, if Patriotic Alternative get banned by law, there is no reason why Momentum should be allowed to keep going. And I also love that this is said while Patriot Alternative were literally attacked. They were literally assaulted, and it's just not brought up again. No, it doesn't. Forget about what those people were after. Forget about their political positions and the people actually committing violence. We got to look at Patriotic Alternative just making memes online and going on walks and camping and stuff. Just because they were recorded saying the N-word and saying anti-Semitic jokes and things like that. Come on, let's be real for a second. We've got bigger problems than this. Will Channel 4 ever do a dispatches on the Muslim Brotherhood or anything like that? No, probably not. Because it's on brand to go after white nationalists. And don't get me wrong, I am against white nationalism. But there's a good reason why I barely do videos covering them. It's because they're not that bigger issue. There are bigger fish to fry out here. Going after these small hiking groups really isn't going to do anything. They're basically a hobby group. They just happen to have really bad politics. And as I say, I think they've grown as big as they can get. They're probably shrinking at this point. I have no idea. But as I say, that's because I have bigger fish to fry. Such as Channel 4 making dogshit documentaries that don't actually explain where the fascism comes in, outside of a few jokes. Anyway, that's everything I had for you today. So as usual, thank you very much for watching. And until next time, goodbye.